Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending this session, the Preventing Chronic Homelessness session. So if you're in the wrong room, now's your time to flee. I'm Chantal Perry with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness Built for Zero team. Just before we get started, the land acknowledgement that the city of Halifax is situated on Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. We acknowledge the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognize that we are all treaty people. So to get started, we have 3 sessions today, and we'll go through them one at a time. Our first session is Supported Referral, an upstream housing intervention to reduce chronic homelessness. And we have Andrea Ness from Homeward Trust, Edmonton, to present.
Good afternoon. I'm so thankful for the plenary speaker this afternoon. If all of you were there to see Jeff, it was really great because he talked a lot about recognizing bright spots and really leaning into the bright spots and a lot about the importance of prevention. And I feel like he set us up really well today to be able to talk about what we're doing within our communities, and hopefully you'll be able to take those back with you. As Chantal said, I'm Andrea Ness. I'm with Homeward Trust in Edmonton. I've been there for 8 years now, always within the area of coordinated access, and I'm really excited to be able to present on supported referrals today. I've been able to observe it from development up until where it is now. Our objectives today, we're just going to talk a little bit about what Homeward Trust is so that you know who we are in Edmonton. We're going to talk a little bit about the system planning purpose of what we do, also describing what supported referrals is, our learnings, and potential future takeaways. So Homeward Trust in Edmonton, we do act as a system planner organization in Edmonton. We take on the day-to-day system operations and strategy work advancing Edmonton's plan to end homelessness. Anybody interested in looking at our plan to end homelessness, it is available on our website. As you can see here, we do a lot of community planning and engagement. We are always taking things from the data and evaluation perspective and reviewing outcomes in order to better practices moving forward. We're very invested in ending homelessness within our community and work collaboratively with many organizations and agencies within our community. Just a little bit about Edmonton, Alberta. So we are the most northernly city in North America with a metropolitan population of over 1 million. Some individuals reference Edmonton as the hub of the north. We do have quite a few individuals and families moving to Edmonton from rural communities surrounding it, as well as more northern communities. In 2021, it was recognized that 12% of Edmontonian households live within the core housing need. And the core housing need refers to whether a private household's housing falls below at least one of the indicator thresholds for housing adequacy, affordability, or suitability, and would have to spend 30% or more of its total before tax income to pay the medium rent or of alternative local housing that is acceptable. I like to point that out because in all communities, we know that housing costs are going up, and it really just does highlight the importance of having prevention built into your housing services and interventions. We have also had an increased use of food bank. I like to add that in there because I know this is something that is being seen nationally across Canada. And again, it's just another indicator that with the increase of people using food banks, that people's stretching their income, and it does make it a little bit more difficult for them to be able to maintain the housing costs. So this is homelessness over time in Edmonton. What you can see here is data from 1999 to 2016 as point-in-time counts, and then 2017 onward is our by name list. Our by name list does include all individuals in Edmonton experiencing homelessness. It is updated in real time as individuals are being referred into our coordinated access system and are being connected to housing interventions and or resolving their own housing situation. Multiple points of contact there. The purpose of supported referrals and having a prevention is to be able to decrease the by name list. If our overall goal is to get chronic homelessness and homelessness to zero within our communities, it's really, really imperative that we have those upstream interventions so that individuals moving into homelessness and staying on the by name list for longer periods of time, that comes to an end ultimately. Individuals within the supported referral program are added onto the by name list because they are experiencing homelessness for a period of time. But what we see is that they rapidly move off of the by name list as they resolve their housing situation with those startup costs. This is just a little depiction of all the different housing interventions that we have within Edmonton, and it also shows our previous need as well as our future need and investment when it comes to housing supports and services within a community. What I want to highlight here, and what's really important, is you can see at the bottom that orange bar is supported referrals, and also diversion is in there. It really does represent that within all communities, you do need to have the upstream intervention to housing, as well as those connections to housing supports that are more intensive interventions. So on here, we do have everything from the highest intensity of supported referrals all the way to supported referrals, which is what I'm going to talk about today. All of our programs do take into consideration the Housing First principles. So I've highlighted all 5 of these here. I know there's been quite a few presentations over the course of yesterday and today that have talked about Housing First principles, but really just important to recognize that overall, we really want to make sure that individuals have the autonomy as much as possible. There's no readiness requirement to housing. All individuals have a right to housing. Person choice and self-determination. This one is always really, really key because we do want individuals to be able to reclaim their self-dependence. Individualized, recovery-oriented, and person-driven supports as well is really important. Everybody has a wide variety of supports to meet their needs. Again, Jeff in the plenary discussion talked about how it's housing first, but not only housing. And that's one of the really exciting things about supported referrals and how we're using it in Edmonton is really creating that allyship across different organizations who provide multiple different services so that there's housing, but also all those other components to support people to maintain their housing. Harm reduction and trauma-informed care as well, very, very important, and social and community integration. Okay, so a quick overview of supported referrals and what it is. We started as a pilot project in 2015. There was one organization that we piloted with, the Institute for the Advancement of Aboriginal Women, IAAW for short. They're a leading Indigenous organization within Edmonton, and within those first periods, we saw that they were able to house multiple women and families in that short period of time who had been experiencing homelessness for a short period of time. From there, we were able to expand supported referrals, which is great. So June 2017 is when we extended to further partners. And where we are today is that we have 19 partner agencies. They serve all populations, single individuals, youth, and families to be able to find and secure housing as quickly as possible. Those organizations I like to highlight are not necessarily housing organizations first. We work with a broad range of organizations who do supported referrals. A good example is HIV Edmonton. They support individuals who have been diagnosed with HIV. They have supported referrals embedded within their programming now, so individuals who are going there for support with their health issues, if they note that they're experiencing housing crisis, that agency is able to then help to support them to find and secure housing in a short period of time. And that individual or family is doing it as independently as possible. We also have partnerships with the Brain Care Center, for example, so they help individuals with moderate to severe brain injuries. We have partnership with our Seniors Association of Greater Edmonton, supporting seniors to move into housing. Old Strathcona Youth Society, so supporting youth. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something completed by housing agencies first. What's really cool is that you can identify agencies within your community that are serving individuals experiencing homelessness that might not have that housing startup, and this is a way to try to broaden that across community. Since inception, we've had 1,328 people who have been housed through supported referrals, and 93% of individuals and families have been able to maintain their housing. So that's great. That 93% of people is 950 people who were successful. We know that 75 individuals returned to our Edmonton by name list who were not successful, and when that happens, what we do is we connect them to another one of those higher intensity services, recognizing that they might need something more. So again, the importance, Jeff, so great today. It is really important to turn off the tap. Really, really important to have those prevention services up front. If you want to end homelessness, you have to make sure that you are providing those upstream interventions where possible. It is a necessary component to any strategy to end homelessness, and Edmonton's updated plan has set a target to divert individuals entering the homeless serving system from an immediate link to community solutions and to housing. The main thing about this intervention is it about shifting so that you have the resources up front, as well as, again, Jeff noted, we do have 5 new supportive housing sites in Edmonton, which is great. You do need a broad range of housing interventions, but this is really important. It does strengthen the housing capacity across the community, and the collaboration across community, it can't be understated. It's so amazing because all the agencies doing supported referrals, because they are not necessarily the housing first, they're able to share resources and connections and be able to collaborate to assist people where possible. This is what the process looks like. So supported referrals is unique in that they don't receive referrals from our coordinated access system. It really begins with the individual experiencing homelessness, engaging with the agency who has the supported referrals up front, in having a conversation with that agency in that screening process. So all our supported referral agencies do use the VI SPIDAT. We have changed it a little bit to add in some comments so that we have some narrative in there and we're asking more about individuals' barriers to housing. We also use in this screening section a housing action plan across our community so that people are creating tangible housing plans with individuals who are coming to them, really highlighting what are their budgets, what do they need regarding housing, which is great. Once those are completed, housing options are explored, and that supported referral agency is doing some light housing coaching to say this is what it could look like. If you're looking for 1-bedroom or bachelor apartments, we can help you to find a list. And they're really supporting them in going on that journey as much as they can on their own. When the individual finds housing, a supported referral application is completed. The supported referral application really just denotes what are the startup resources that the individual may require. Startup resources within supported referrals include everything from damage deposit, first month's rent, to Find Furniture Bank. So the Furniture Bank here in Edmonton, we do have a Find Furniture Bank called Find. Maybe you saw their presentation earlier today. It's a social enterprise that does provide free furniture to individuals and families moving out of homelessness. So individuals and families taking part in the supported referral process are also provided with free furniture to furnish their homes. Then there's move-in and setup, which is always really exciting. We love that move-in process for anybody. The one thing about supported referrals is that there isn't necessarily any ongoing case management. It is really up to that agency who has that pre-existing relationship with the individual to have those ongoing conversations as they're connecting naturally for support. However, we do know that 93% of individuals and families have been successful because every supported referral agency once a month for a period of 6 months intentionally connects with the family or individual to find out how their housing is going, if there's any gaps or anything else that they need. So again, they're being proactive. If that person or family says, oh, I'm doing really well, but food is an issue for me, then they're able to right away have that conversation about where food banks are in community and try to connect to resources. So it's helping people up at the front to try to secure housing as quickly as possible so that their experience of homelessness is limited, and also having intentional conversations along the way to find out is there anything else that you need to support them in maintaining their housing. Now I'll show you a little bit of data. So our data here starts in 2017. You can see that there's a big amp up, and we've come to a place where we're doing just about 500 supported referrals within community per year. You can see 2023 is only at 300, but we are on track to get to that 500 this year, which is really exciting. We, for our HMIS, use Efforts to Outcome, ETO, so all supported referral information application processes completed in that database. So we are able to track who is being supported through supported referrals and what outcomes are, and to pivot where needed. This demonstrates household types. So really what I wanted to show here is that it can be utilized for both single individuals and for families. 53 single individuals in Edmonton have been supported to secure housing through supported referrals, and 47% have been families. It has been very, very helpful with families to support and stabilize family homes before children have had to be apprehended. We've heard that on a few occasions, and making it available to all household types is really imperative. A difficulty can sometimes be roommate situations where people are trying to be supported to find one housing for two people. Supported referrals really works well with that because it helps the individuals wanting to move in together to move through that process as independently as possible and works. Okay, next, just a little bit about demographics. So you can see here through ethnicity that the majority of supported referrals have been completed with Indigenous populations within our community. We love to see it because all our programs and services do prioritize providing supports and services to Indigenous peoples. We've had lots of conversations, and many people have noted that there's a lot of intergenerational trauma and discrimination, and the amount of Indigenous peoples experiencing homelessness is not okay. So we love to see that this is working very well to support that. Gender as well, I like to highlight 57% of people who have received supported referral are women. It has been a great thing for women who are leaving domestic violent situations, as an example. This is a really quick way to be able to provide startup costs to someone who is leaving a situation of violence to be able to find housing. Next, household activity or acuity. This is really to demonstrate through looking at that VI SPDAT. We know with the VI SPDAT, it does provide a score on the end. With all our Housing First programs and services, we do not just look at the score of the VI SPDAT, but we do look at it as a metric to be able to see what are the needs of the individual. I really wanted to highlight this because it is useful for individuals of all levels of acuity. We can't assume who will be successful in finding and securing housing on their own. What's really great about supported referrals and it being embedded within agencies who already have that pre-existing relationship, for individuals who may have higher acuity, they're already really well supported by the organization agency that they're working with. And that agency organization knows maybe what other supports the person needs. So for people who may have a higher acuity and they're being supported through supported referrals, only that light touch once a month check-in, not ongoing case management. They're able to connect them to resources to help to stabilize them in their housing. And again, only 93% have returned to, or 93% have been successful. So this is really, really great. And then I just have one other graph to show you, and it's about the services or the resources provided. So the majority of households who have received a supported referral have received more than one resource. The top resources needed by household and person have included rent and damage deposit, as well as the find furniture resource, because many individuals who are experiencing homelessness have lost their belongings. And that find furniture, that free furniture for the individual or family could include just beds, or it could include a whole household. So those are the most common one. But it is really important to be able to have multiple startup resources because it's never really the case. You can see 5% utilized one resource, but it is important to have more than one because generally if somebody's having difficulty securing damage deposit, first month's rent is also going to be a thing. Also might be insurance for the home, all those items. Yeah, okay. Our learnings. So Again, as I mentioned, with everything within efforts to outcomes, we are able to review the data and see where we might need to pivot or need more resources moving forward. What we have learned is that communication across the system is really, really important to be able to not duplicate services, because everybody uses that HMIS, our efforts to outcome. We can see if somebody goes to one agency and has a conversation about their housing, and they start that conversation about supported referrals, they've done a housing plan, and they go to another agency, that other agency will also be able to see that a housing plan has been started, so that conversation can be completed. You do need to have a standardized method of tracking, because it is important to, again, learn from the data and understand where there may be gaps and how things are going. There is a system-wide accountability to supporting people in housing crisis. I know it's often we look to those agencies that are doing housing. Homeward Trust is, our system planner in homelessness. We get a lot of people inquiring to us, but it's not just the housing-specific agencies. People experiencing homelessness are connecting at multiple agencies for multiple resources across community, and as much as we can build in housing resources within those agencies, the better it'll be for individuals experiencing homelessness. We do love opportunities to broaden housing work across the community. So again, it's that piece. If somebody is going to HIV Edmonton and talks about their housing, it's really great that they can start that housing conversation and support them with their housing, as opposed to saying, okay, we've helped you with your health needs here and provided you with support, but actually you have to go to this organization to talk about housing. We do have some places that we still want to go. So we have diversion. Diversion as a practice of preventing people from experiencing chronic homelessness. We have it happening across all our organizations doing supported referrals, and all organizations a part of our coordinated access system, but it's not necessarily a formalized approach yet, so that's something that we're looking to do. We do want to expand more into the prevention space. Supported referrals was initially created to assist people experiencing a short experience of homelessness to resolve their housing situation as quickly as possible. But what we're noticing with housing costs increasing, the increase in food bank use, all of that, we do need to move maybe a little bit even more upstream with supported referrals into the prevention space. We've started to use supported referrals across the outreach and shelter spaces. We have a couple of shelters in Edmonton that are able to help people to secure their housing as quickly as possible because they have supported referrals. And we do have outreach agencies who have supported referrals within them as well, which is great, but we would really love to expand there and scaling up. So again, because it's not necessarily housing agencies that are doing supported referral, as we're learning of other agencies, organizations that are supporting people experiencing homelessness, we start having those conversations with them about this is a possibility, would you like to be a part of the system, because it's a great thing to do. Okay. And I'm just on time. This is my contact information. I will be here for questions after.
Thank you, Andrea. While we're just flipping the slide deck here, our friends on the floor or standing, there's lots of seats available, so feel free to come on in and make yourself at home. There we go. And up next, we have Abigail Shepard from End Homelessness St. John's, who's going to talk about financial footholds in changing landscapes, evolution of the supported referral program in St. John's, Newfoundland.
Thanks, Chantal. Hi, everyone. As much as this might sound like it'll be a repeat of the Homeward Trust presentation, I promise it won't. It looks a little different in the St. John's landscape. However, as we'll get to in a moment, supported referrals in St. John's is modeled after Homeward Trust's great work up front. So I hate that got weird. It wasn't weird on my screen, but I'm not going to go through the land acknowledgement again, but just to, we want to pay attention to the fact that from Newfoundland and Labrador, we are working in the traditional and unceded lands of the Innu and Inuit and Mi'kmaq people. And we do take our responsibilities as working in that territory and working alongside our Indigenous partners very seriously. And we always want to work from a space of humility and respect and true partnership and true allyship. So End Homelessness St. John's, which is my home agency, uses the hashtag We Can End It because we do truly believe that working in partnership, working creatively, working collaboratively, we can actually achieve our goal of ending homelessness in St. John's and ensuring that everyone does have a place to call home. I'm going to flip through these upfront slides very quickly because I really front-loaded my slide deck, but these will be available, and some of the things that we're not going to get to are provided in the back as well. So End Homelessness St. John's role is as one of the designated communities to Reaching Home and is the community entity for St. John's. You'll hear me reference coordinated access as coordinated access to homes, which is how we refer to it in St. John's, as we do want to keep focus on what the ultimate goal of coordinated access is. It's not just about access, it's about achieving housing, homes for folks. And in terms of where Supported Referrals lives in our agency, so we do have 3 main priority areas that we work within. So systems coordination is what I oversee. That would host Supported Referrals, that would host coordinated access, some of our veterans work, all those kinds of partnership building pieces of work. Knowledge mobilization would be our data collection folks, and HIFIS and all that good stuff. And community investment is kind of how we action what we're seeing and the trends that we're kind of coming across in the community, how we invest, literally. They're all very self-explanatory, frankly, but all 3 of our priority areas are overlaid very much from a leadership and advocacy perspective and from a stakeholder engagement perspective, because again, in a small community like St. John's, we can't do this work alone, and nor do we really want to at all. So for Supported Referrals, it is, as I said, modeled after Homeward Trust's great work in Edmonton, as Andrea spoke to very beautifully. So we launched it in St. John's in 2018 in June. It does, again, provide flexible and customized financial resources to help individuals who are either experiencing homelessness or who are at imminent risk. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. All of our participants for Supported Referrals come through coordinated access to homes and through community partner agencies. So we aren't able to do that work directly with our government partners, but we do work around that pretty nicely. So just to give you kind of a quick snapshot of what it would look like to access Supported Referrals, from a timeline perspective, we don't have a Supported Referrals application per se. We have, you basically contact, again, this is some of the abilities of like a small community because we do all just know each other very well. But basically, a community support will send an email to our coordinated access email. Within a day, we get any like missing documentation that we need on our end to be able to move forward with it, get an approval out, and then the agency makes the payment, gets reimbursed from us, and away we go. So Supported Referrals in St. John's meets needs for 2 main groups. So folks who are currently experiencing homelessness and need that kind of one-time touch, which again, I'll get into a little bit more in a bit, but generally it's a one-time rental assistance for that first month's rent, or it's a security deposit top-up. For folks at imminent risk of homelessness, can be a little bit more complicated, of course, but for folks who need a one-time financial assistance to stay where they are, if where they are is safe, sustainable, affordable for them. So imminent risk of homelessness is within 2 months of becoming, so if there's, I'll talk a little bit about that as well, but for folks who, sometimes we do get requests for Supported Referrals where an eviction is coming in 6 months. We would consider that a large enough window that hopefully some other work in terms of prevention can be done. But if it's within 2 months of an imminent loss of existing housing, then we can step in with Supported Referrals. So the main one that we do see would be eviction, which would be demonstrated to us by an eviction notice. Again, we don't want to force an eviction notice, so we can kind of work flexibly around that if the landlord has said, I really don't want to have to set a notice, but this is not going to be sustainable if this person can't kind of come through and make a payment on some overdue rental arrears. The second thing we see a ton of is utilities. And again, I'll speak to that a little bit more in a moment, but we would also need that to be demonstrated by a utilities disconnect notice. And we do, again, that's the kind of thing that you can unfortunately see coming, so we are able to have some of those conversations as well. Some of the other reasons that folks may access supported referrals for an imminent loss of housing to come would be if there's sometimes relationship breakdowns of any kind of relationship that would impact housing, if there's violence or abuse, and again, that can be pretty wide-ranging, including from the landlord, from family members, not just, but also certainly in a domestic violence situation. If the housing has become unsafe or inappropriate, so if the landlord has been notified of, for example, the hot water's not working and is refusing to kind of move forward with that, then we would help that person make some changes to their living arrangements. And if there's a change in suitability, which is something we're seeing a ton of in St. John's right now, and I'm sure it's true in other parts of the country as well, but as our population ages, those kind of mobility needs, accessibility needs are changing very significantly and can really mean that housing that may have been sustainable for a long time is no longer so. So for our partner agencies, so we do have, give or take, we've had about, I think, 30 partner agencies involved in supported referrals at any given time. It does come and go. So we ask that folks would have signed a coordinated access to homes MOU with us. They do have to be a nonprofit, as I've said, or a community-based agency, so we can't fund for probably obvious reasons, we can't fund our municipal, provincial, or federal counterparts. They must be able to pay, so the agencies have to be able to pay that expense directly and then get reimbursed by us. So we don't make direct payments to clients or to landlords, just kind of adds a little bit of a buffer zone there. They must have, so the supporting agency must have exhausted all existing resources and support. So sometimes that's a struggle for agencies. Again, there's so few options sometimes for clients that the tendency can be, I'm going to go for a supported referral because we know that's probably going to get approved, but we do ask that agencies work with their clients to explore any natural resources, any other supports that might exist before they come to us. We want to be kind of a last door, not the first option. And individuals, again, we are into homelessness St. John's, so for obvious reasons, individuals do have to be living in the St. John's metro region. And so I've touched on this a little bit already, but in terms of times that we don't approve a supported referral, it would just usually be if there's incomplete information or documentation. So if there's a request for an eviction notice and that can't be brought forward, or there's utilities disconnect hasn't been kind of provided, we do need the kind from our end, we need a bit of a paper trail to be able to back up why we're making that investment. If there's no sustainability plan or an unclear sustainability plan, we want to meet that immediate need, but we want to make sure that it's going to be, as much as anyone can know that, a one-time kind of issue. So if the rental, for example, is completely unaffordable for the person, stepping in, kind of clearing those arrears, only to have them kind of reaccumulate and come up again for them, even though that can be a hard conversation to have with supports and for the supports to have with clients, is not necessarily the most effective. It's not going to make that space more affordable for them in the long run. So we want to make sure that if we're kind of keeping someone in their existing housing or moving them into new housing with supported referrals, then it's a space that's going to make sense for them. Have not exhausted other resources, as I spoke to, and if, again, as I spoke to, if the client is not experiencing or at imminent risk of homelessness, if it's just a little bit too early. And for the sustainability plan, which I've already kind of spoken to, it's just ensuring that, again, it's as less likely to occur, again, as much as anyone can possibly know that. We know things happen. We know that it's a very tight rental market. We know that situations are very unaffordable for folks right now as cost of living increases. but we do want to try to make sure that all that work up front, and that is the ask that we make of partner agencies, that they kind of truly do put the support in supported referrals and help out that client to make sure that whatever we're intervening with isn't going to have to continue. So in terms of the types of expenses that we cover, so in terms of exiting homelessness, we almost always would see something that looks like one-time rental assistance and usually a security deposit top-up. For folks who are accessing income support in Newfoundland and Labrador, currently, I mean, I think some changes are coming, but currently the security deposit amount is $372 from income support. That's not going to get you like a shoebox, frankly. Let alone a house. So we do step in so generally folks will access whatever they're able to from income support, for example, get the $372, we would top up the rest so that folks can move in. We do look at rental arrears and utilities arrears, and again, those are almost exclusively for folks who are at imminent risk of homelessness. Again, assuming that that it's going to be a one-time thing. Utilities arrears, sometimes we will pay off for folks who are exiting homelessness if they have a new rental lined up and it is pay-own utilities, which almost everything is at this point in time, because in order to get power in your name, you do need to be able to have your arrears cleared, and they do follow you around. So we will sometimes look at those for folks exiting homelessness as well. For moving expenses and housing setup costs, again, that can come and go, but that's usually folks exiting homelessness. Housing setup costs will be a very limited budget, and unfortunately, what we've ended up spending that on recently has been a lot of air mattresses, because our local furniture bank has been very depleted in terms of their stock and very slow in terms of being able to get beds to folks. So unfortunately, we don't want to be funding air mattresses. That's not my favorite, but it's better than having nothing to sleep on. Property maintenance and repairs we would look at in the sense of usually maintaining housing for folks at imminent risk. Again, we would ask a lot of questions about that. For anyone at imminent risk also, if they're about to lose their housing, we require that they can stay in that space. So the landlord also has to commit from their end that if these damages are repaired or if rental arrears are paid, then the person has to be able to stay there, and the landlord has to commit to that. We're not going to pay off things to maintain landlord relationships just so that the person can then subsequently be evicted. Oops. And I'm actually not going to get too far into these. We do have the types of expenses breakdowns in full, and I backloaded them into the slide deck as well, just so that you can have a look at them after the fact if you like. So in terms of our annual spending and budget, from 2018-2019, it was pretty limited. We were primarily doing supported referrals through our coordinated access intake process in those years, which would have been having a VAT completed, which is how you got added to our by name list. That is no longer the case. Also, I think it quickly became clear that having a pretty intensive assessment in order to access like a rental or a security deposit top-up is really not particularly person-centered or particularly trauma-informed. So, unfortunately, what happened is there was kind of reasonable amounts, and then post-pandemic, especially still kind of mid-pandemic when the rental market was a little bit looser, we saw a huge spike in supported referral dollars going out the door. Our budget in 21-22 was $180,000. We ended up spending $266,000. So it's kind of ticked down a little bit since then, because we've kind of put in place some flexibility and some kind of restrictions is a crappy word, but some better checks and balances on our end in terms of how we're spending that money. So in 22-23, we would have had 555 requests, and we would have approved 464 of them. Again, by and large, utilities arrears, and that hasn't changed at all going into this particular year, but utilities arrears eats up the vast majority of that budget. And again, year-to-date so far this year, we have 255 requests and we've approved 218. Again, the majority utility arrears, but we're also seeing some significant rental arrears as well. Okay, so in terms of challenges that we've seen with the Supported Referrals program, needless to say, as cost of living has risen significantly, we've been challenged a bit with this particular program in terms of where we intervene. So is it a poverty issue? Is it a homelessness issue? They obviously overlap significantly, but where is our effort best targeted? So we have tried to, and I'll speak to that again in a second as well, but we have tried to focus in on intervening with homelessness and supporting all the work that helps to fight against poverty, because our voice there is important, but it isn't the key purpose of this particular program. Rental market challenges, so again, emergence of non-market rental rates, we've had to kind of, I'll speak to that too, but I guess I can just speak to it now, but we've seen as the rental market has tightened from maybe about 7% vacancy rate, I want to say, mid-pandemic, it's down to about 2% in St. John's right now. So very significantly challenging to find a rental that will work for folks. And for folks who are considered hard to house, who are chronically homeless folks, sometimes that can mean that their only option, quote unquote, is some very significantly expensive landlord properties that we aren't able to necessarily, where that damage deposit is built into the cost of the rent. So if you're paying $3,000 a month for rent, in St. John's, Newfoundland for a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom apartment, then the expectation from our end is that you've built in that security deposit and we're not going to pay a $1,700 security deposit further. Sometimes I think as Supported Referrals has kind of taken off a little bit in the community, sometimes the messaging around the purpose of the program can be challenging. Again, as I sort of alluded to, that instinct is to go to that door first. But we do want you to kind of come to that door a little bit last. So sometimes our messaging around that can be a little bit of a challenge. I've already alluded to the stagnation of income support rates, and particularly in terms of coordination of provincial funding streams. So right now we do have a healthcare, mental health and addictions top-up that folks can access. We have the income support benefits, and we have the Canada Housing Benefit. None of them talk to each other. None of them align their dates of payment. My coworker's laughing because this is our life all the time. But basically, for Supported Referrals, what ends up happening is we do end up paying that first month's rent, even when those subsidies are going to kick in, because for getting someone out of shelter quickly, otherwise they'd have to wait a month or 2 months before the landlord would start seeing some funding. And again, in a tight rental market, the landlord's not going to wait. The landlord's going to go to the next person. Yep. And from our perspective, one of our challenges is recording and reporting long-term successes. So we are moving towards everything that goes through Supported Referrals does get entered on our by name list, including the at imminent risk folks. We do strive. We are making some great steps towards moving our by name list onto Salesforce so that we have a little bit of a better view of A, our by name list, but B, the effectiveness, the efficacy of that program. Because we should start to be able to see some really good data in terms of what's working and what's not. The main change that we made last year was prioritizing according to homelessness status and chronicity. So we now, because again, we had a huge influx of demand, we continue to, for folks who have never experienced homelessness before, and we know that the best predictor of homelessness future is homelessness past, unfortunately. But we want to make sure that we're servicing our chronically homeless folks first. So folks who are currently homeless and chronically homeless, and folks who then are currently homeless and non-chronic, and then at imminent risk and chronic. We want to make sure that when folks who are chronically homeless either have a space that will work for them or have a space that is currently working for them, they can keep it. We don't want to provide barriers to that, and we want to make sure we intervene wherever we can. That doesn't mean that folks at imminent risk with zero history of homelessness don't access supported referrals. It just means that we would probably ask a lot more questions. We would look for some more natural supports. We would look for some more other options that folks who have never been homeless before might be able to access. And what we have seen in preliminarily looking at the efficiency of our program is that for folks who did experience a denial from us, almost all of them did remain housed when they were at imminent risk. So, benefits, opportunities, and next steps. So again, because of the way it works in our community, those agencies, I think what's really great about supported referrals is that those agencies aren't fighting for dollars because it's client-centered. The client request comes to us from the agency. There's no like allocation of money for one agency versus another. The agencies, again, as Andrea kind of pointed to, agencies work together very frequently in terms of supporting their clients. So we definitely see the benefit of that. We see the efficient exits from homelessness. And we do see overall savings for systems, which happily, as I'll speak to in a second, systems are also starting to see as well. And I think I've spoken to most of these. We're not going to pay security deposit top-ups for non-market rate rentals. We do, I think the one great thing about the small community context for this work is that it allows us to address population-specific challenges. So something like the huge increase in seniors who are experiencing homelessness in our community, we're able to kind of direct our work in that avenue and kind of focus on what we can do more efficiently. And as I've also sort of alluded to, and I know that I've run out of time, we have seen interest and ability from our provincial partners who have seen the cost effectiveness of supported referrals and are willing to come to the table and talk to us about how that can be included. I think actually, yeah. So we do have a lot of opportunities going forward in terms of how we collect data and how we are better able to reflect the efficiency of the program, but I will clue it up there. And thank you very much for listening. Happy to take questions after.
Thanks, Abigail. Yeah. And up next, we have Melissa Giles, and she's from Van City Community Foundation. And she's going to talk about the transformation, well, evolution and transformation of the rent bank in BC.
I'm a popular speaker. As you can see, people are quickly escaping. My reputation precedes me. I'm just kidding. Everybody stand up because it's like I'm third speaker in an afternoon session after a salmon dinner. So let's just do a great big stretch. Do some deep breaths in and some deep breaths out. And just wiggle and wiggle and wiggle, and then we'll get going. You won't believe it, but I was trained as a teacher. You might not believe that either. So, as mentioned, I am Melissa Giles. I'm the managing director at BC Rent Bank, which is a project of Van City Community Foundation. I want to acknowledge the lands on which we're gathered today and pay my respects to elders, both past and present. I'm grateful to be a guest on these lands. Thanks as well to the conference for having me today. So, what do I hope we cover today? There's a couple of things. Just by show of hands, how many of you have ever heard of a rent bank before? I can skip the first half of the presentation. It's awesome. But I want you to have a deeper knowledge about rent banks and what they're doing, both in BC as well as in Canada. How have we changed and adapted the program as a result of the pandemic and the changing needs that we're seeing within the renter market? What impact are rent banks having in our communities and in the prevention and housing stability area? And at the end, if you can make it through with me, I'll have a QR code and we have some resources available to you, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, when we went to preview this, the video wasn't picking up the sound. So I'm going to try to angle it down, and we'll see how it goes. Technology is not my thing, but we're going to make it happen. And this video that you see is a really great overview of the work that we started in 2019. We were nominated for an award by the Premier's office around partnerships, and I think by watching this short video, you'll get a sense of how did this program change and evolve and develop, and how did we get things going in BC. So let's see if we can do this. Well, first of all, I'm going to watch it this way, which is also terrible, but.
We're at the Purpose Society. We're in downtown New Westminster, the older part. Working at the rent bank is pretty rewarding, actually, because you're helping people in an immediate crisis and alleviating some of that crisis work.
Are you behind on rent at all? Or
Rent Bank is a homelessness prevention and housing stability program. And what we do is we offer interest-free loans to low to moderate income earners who are renters, who face a temporary crisis. We had 7 of them in existence when BC Rent Bank began. And these were all independent nonprofit organizations who had learned about the benefits of Rent Bank. They were offering those out to community.
One of the first things the BC Rent Bank did was create a diverse steering committee that included housing organizations, Indigenous organizations, business organizations, BC Housing, and government. And that became the mechanism where we developed the strategy and implemented the rent bank system across the province. It was never the province's intent to be the sole operator or funder, but rather to support local rent banks, local communities with local knowledge to provide those services.
it removed my fear of being evicted and a possible trauma for my husband, who's a person with disability, and myself. I am very grateful with the rent bank.
The most common way that an individual who's needing assistance can access services is the website bcrentbank.ca, and they can go to our apply page and complete a pre-assessment. And when they hit submit on that, that actually goes to the rent bank that serves their community. And within a few days, a case manager will be in touch with them to talk more about what's going on and look at solutions. We're about looking at situations beyond just that financial. We also want to connect them to other community resources.
Any other factors that impact your housing needs? If there's any referrals we can provide. So this can be things like mental health challenges.
People actually keep their housing for an extended period of time after being helped by us. And that is huge. Having the BC Rent Bank as a provincial body that oversees the rent banks has stabilized our loan capital. There's a heck of a lot of detailed work in processing loan applications, reviewing people's bank statements, and having the ability to properly staff to fulfill all of those pieces and engage in community development has been absolutely huge.
For us, our partners, whether that's our community nonprofit partners, whether it's our funding partners, our municipal leaders, they've been absolutely instrumental. And it's through their efforts in coming together and willing to work with an unknown entity called BC Rent Bank that we've really been able to achieve this work. There's also nothing so humbling as watching yourself on screen while you're in front of a group of people. So don't worry, my ego is not so big. Okay. All right, so as you learned in that short video, and as many of you already indicated by your hands, you know a great deal about rent banks. I'm so passionate about this topic, we could probably stop right here and that could be the presentation. And as well, if you don't hear enough, I'm in ARH3 next with my colleagues talking about what we're doing across Canada for rent banks. But I love that story of Lou's. And the thing that you don't see in her story is that, you know, you heard about her husband, but he actually suffered a stroke. He was a primary income earner in their family, And as a result, their housing became very unstable. So they were able to access the rent bank, and they actually were able to come back to us a second time. They had to move locations to get better services, and they came back to the rent bank, and we were able to support them again. And that's the beauty of the rent bank program, as we see people supported in their walk towards housing stability. When I started this work in 2019, I used to go around BC and I would say, I'd like to talk to you about a rent bank. And they'd look at me like, what's a rent bank? I'm so pleased. Here at this conference, we've had three sessions on rent banks. And as I travel around BC and now Canada, I'm hearing more about it. And so that makes me excited to be in this work and to be doing this. So as you learned and know, rent banks are focused on the eviction prevention and housing stability. We work with low to moderate income earners who are facing a temporary crisis. And this is defined for us as something different than somebody who needs an ongoing monthly rent supplement, for example, in order to maintain their housing. And we see everything from, I had a root canal, or I had to have a root canal, and I had to decide, do I pay my rent or do I get my tooth fixed? My car broke down. I need that car for work. Do I pay my rent this month? I'm preaching to the choir, as they say. We're all working in housing. We know the struggles that people are facing. But that's the type of people that we're working with, and we're looking to make sure that they have that assistance. So in a traditional rent bank program, it is an interest-free loan. That is its advantage. It can be paid over a period of up to 3 years. It can be paid for things like rent, whether that's money owing or upcoming rent or getting into housing. We also cover essential utilities, which we define right now as gas and hydro, and water if it's not covered. The thing about the rent bank program is it's not only a housing support program, but I also like to talk to people about the fact that it's a great financial option for people. So if you can imagine you're struggling and you're stressed out, you only have so many choices. Perhaps you don't have enough assets, so you can't go into a financial institution and get a small loan. And you're not on maybe social assistance, or you don't have other support, so where do you turn? And the rent bank is a great option for people in that circumstance. We're trying to help people avoid places like payday loans and money mart and high interest lending institutions. I would say over this last year, unfortunately, we're meeting more and more people with high credit card debt, and they've already turned to places like payday loans and other places for solutions. We want to get ahead of that game in the future. We want to make sure that they know we're available, that we're an option for them instead of having to find themselves in those situations. So in addition to those financial supports, rent banks also, as you saw on the screen, case managers are there to support with additional referrals and connections. We do everything from advocacy to tenant rights. We work with renters around mediation with their landlords. We work with them at that point of crisis, and then we say, hey, there's still this big pile of debt and we can't ignore it. So let's get you into maybe debt consolidation or talking to somebody about a pathway out of that so that they can see greater stability in their housing. We want just to connect out into community, and that's the reason we've built our model, which is based on a relationship with nonprofit organizations in the community, knowing what's available to renters. Who uses a rent bank? Last year, we saw age demographics from 19 all the way up into 80s, but last year our largest age demographic was 30 to 39-year-olds, and 46.9% of applicants were living in a family situation. 53% of applicants were looking for that next month's rent. And what we see within rent banks consistently is that people's rent-to-income ratios are climbing. We saw things frighteningly before the pandemic at around 48%, and in the height of the pandemic, we saw people with applications as high as 60%. So it's quite startling. The difference between a rent bank and BC rent bank, BC and Manitoba are currently the only two provinces within Canada that have provincial structures to their rent banks. We have lots of municipal groups in Ontario, and I know that the province of New Brunswick announced recently that they're going to get a rent bank going. Tobin just did jazz hands in the corner. She's from New Brunswick. We are a project of Van City Community Foundation with funding provided by the province. When we got started in 2019, we really set out 3 goals. We had 7 existing rent banks. We wanted to provide seed funding and support and get that service all across the province. So today we have 18 rent banks. No matter where you live in the province, you can access the service. and we wanted to really think about what does a province-wide system look like. So we started working with those existing groups. We learned from them. We began to envision how we could grow this service, and we really work with those nonprofit organizations. And as we launched them, we started to think about city centers. So if you take a regional district like Central Okanagan, you know, we knew Kelowna would be a great place to have a partner, and then they can serve renters throughout that regional district because they already have connections. Maybe they can have satellite sites where people can come in and get assistance, but they would play the central role of bookkeeping and reporting and that kind of thing, and we didn't have to keep duplicating municipality by municipality. So really for BC Rent Bank, we're behind the scenes. You won't see us. Renters don't talk to us. They talk directly to the organization. But we want to make sure that our partners are really supported in their work. So we provide the funding for them. We've built a custom client software management system so that online application goes right to the dashboard of the case manager. They can review it. A lot of you are familiar with these systems, write case notes, updates, and determine the outcome of that. The beauty of this system is it's also allowed us to collect aggregated data, so we know what's happening both within regions in BC, but also across the province. So that's been a big advantage. To date, we've granted over $7.3 million in funding to our Rent Bank partners, and last year, those partners distributed almost $1.5 million out to renters. In addition to those funding and technology supports, we have a resource library, we do onboard training, we schedule professional development. We've done things like bring in DocuSign, offered that as a free service to our partners. And this year we'll be stretching ourselves more into the research and advocacy sphere. Impact, you know, it's hard to talk about our programs and recognize that growth in access or growth in demand is not the positive. If I lived in an ideal world, we would never have a rent bank because it means we have affordable housing solutions for people. Unfortunately, we're not in that position, and we're not going to probably be there for decades. So we need solutions like a rent bank that acts as bridge funding to keep people stabilized, keep them in their homes while they're going through those turbulent times. Since we began in 2019, we've provided financial assistance to just over 4,100 households in BC. Last year, we saw a 22% increase in the instances where we gave out financial assistance. And we estimate that we have touched base with about 16,000 renters or households for some of those secondary or supplementary supports that I talked about, whether it's referrals out into community, debt consolidation, those kinds of things. We also measure impact not only from the prevention side, how did we prevent that eviction? Because we know once people lose their housing, you're all going to shake your head. Getting back into another rental is more expensive. It's the cost of moving. It's all of those things. So first and foremost, if we can help you keep your housing, we want to do so. In 2021, we also did a study with our renters that used our services, and we reached back to them 6 months after they had received financial assistance and did a survey. And what we found out in that survey is that 94% of respondents indicated that they had maintained or improved their housing. 91% of those respondents credited the rent bank specifically with helping them to do that. And 61% of those respondents said they would have become homeless had it not been for the rent bank service. We want to get better at measuring those kinds of things, but those were early indicators to us that things are working. 5 minutes, hey? Look at that. Time is flying. I do want to share a couple testimonials because I think that numbers and data tell story, but I also want to keep the human element to this. So if I can share a couple testimonials. In that survey, one renter said, "Housing is so important, and without rent bank assistance, I wouldn't have been able to secure the medication that I needed to treat my chronic cancer and pain condition." Another said, "I can't say enough how profoundly this program has helped me by not having to worry about all of the volatility that I was going through during the pandemic. It just gave me breathing room. I didn't have to give up my car, so I ended up being able to get more jobs and have a means of getting there. 6 months later, I'm stable again, and it was just at that moment that I needed help, a moment that could very well have made myself and my family homeless." And in that survey, we also heard back from renters some of the challenges they were facing, so we have work to do, but they also talked about the way that they were treated with dignity, with respect, that they were met compassionately. And that's the kind of program I want to represent. And I was really happy to hear some of those things. So the evolution, where are we going? As we all learned, COVID-19 had its curses and also its blessings. And some of these things were really great for us. It accelerated change within our rent bank system. It allowed a willingness to be able to adopt and adapt new practices. We've partnered with Reaching Home. Many of you are familiar with that program. That allows us to offer the loans, but also non-repayable grants. We just know some renters don't have the capacity to repay a loan. So by partnering with Reaching Home, we can help more renters. We also partnered with an organization called Spark BC. Last year, we were able to deliver over 450 welcome home kits to people moving out of homelessness into housing. This was with material items. So in the past couple of years, we're constantly looking at things. We've increased our amortization periods from 2 to 3 years. We've increased the allowable maximum loan amount. And we've shifted even our language. We used to talk about homelessness prevention, and we're much more on the eviction prevention language and talking about the need to do that. So the future for us, really, what I love about the rent bank program is I compare it to a storefront. You know, renters are coming to us anyway. They're coming to us in desperate situations. So my vision is we have more solutions for them. So we want to look at better financial solutions, loans, grants, rent supplements, all of these things to support renters. We know that we're getting data and we can get better at it. And the reason is we want to move into that advocacy sphere and be able to start to talk about the underlying causes about what is bringing people to rent banks anyway. And obviously we want to support our partners moving into the future. We've gone and established this great provincial rent bank system, but we need to make sure those partners have the resources in order to do their work well. And we're part of the Canadian Coalition, or the Canadian Rent Bank Coalition, and that's been a great space of other provinces and municipalities, both operating rent banks, as well as those interested in learning about it, and we meet on a monthly basis, and so we're excited about that work. So as promised, before I run out of time, if you wanted to, there's resources available to you. You can also get them through this website, but this is probably the easiest way for you to do it. There's 3 resources on there for you. One of them is the toolkit. It's kind of like the 10,000-foot level. You know, your community, you're thinking about it. It's about who do you bring to the table, who are the stakeholders, and it walks you through a step-by-step process, the things to consider in beginning to operate a rent bank. We developed a toolkit as well, and that kind of acts as a guide with the toolkit. So while you're working through it, you can use it as a recording space. And then the third thing that we've put up available to you is our operations manual. So this is much more getting things going and operating it, and it has examples and templates and things like that for you. So those resources are hopefully can be of value to you. I always tell people that they reflect promising practices, not best practices. We are still a work in progress. We're learning. This year we want to strengthen our work by partnering with more Indigenous organizations as well, and look at making sure that our services are culturally appropriate and safe spaces. And so we learn. We're not in a place of being all-knowing. Both the market causes us to change as well as the information that we gather, and we want to adapt. So this is what we call our promising practices at this time. And this is my contact information in case you wanted to get a hold of me. So info@BC Rent Bank or melissa@bcrentbank.ca. I'll be here, and then I'll be in the presentation in room 3 right after this, and would love to talk to any of you. And I'll end by how I started, which is gratitude. And that is gratefulness that you hung in there this afternoon and that you stayed present in the room, and that I had this opportunity to be able to share with you just some of the things that we're learning in BC. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Melissa. Now we get to the fun part, questions. So I do have a mic here. I can run to you. We have a mic at the back as well. Oh, we have a runner. Here we go.
I'm just wondering, so I'm from New Brunswick, and the talks are happening about New Brunswick getting a rent bank going. And one thing that I get really stuck on with it, because our organization runs a similar fund in our city that's called prevention funds, except you don't pay it back, but it runs very similar to, is it going to be a sustainable plan and all that for outcomes. My biggest concern has been, what is the risk of harm done financially to those who don't pay it back?
Yeah.
Like, is it going to be similar to what happened with COVID funds, where they get garnished?
Okay.
And
Are we talking friends in a room? We, as much as possible, build relational equity with renters, which is we want to stay in touch with them. We want to touch base, mostly because we want to know, is this working? Has this stabilized your housing? Do you need other supports? We don't have bailiffs. If somebody misses a payment, we reach out and say, is there anything we can do to support you? Can we defer that? Can we reduce that payment? I've never sent a collection agency. Honestly, we go to the best that we can. Because the other thing is that loan capital gets recycled and sent back out to more renters. So we do have a responsibility in many ways to keep that loan capital high so that we can help more people. We understand that people are going to most likely face another blip, which caused them to come to the rent bank in the first place. We're not connected to credit rating scores. We don't have any way to track that. We don't report to anybody that this person didn't pay it. So, is anybody here from the province of BC? Just kidding. So, we're really focused on the eviction prevention and housing stability piece. We want to encourage people to pay back their loans so that others can benefit from the program. But we're not chasing people down the street.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Sorry, we'll get a mic to you, that's all.
The question he asked is, what is the default or the non-repayment rate? Pre-pandemic and post-pandemic? Pre-pandemic, it was probably 75 to 80%, and now we're struggling more in the 50 to 60%. To be honest as well, we've stopped asking our partners right now because it's not one of the reporting metrics that's required of us, and I would rather be of assistance to more renters, and I feel like talking about the repayment rate puts the wrong emphasis on the program. That the emphasis is we prevented the eviction. That by itself probably paid the value of the loan because they weren't displaced, they didn't access social services, they didn't have to take demands. So we put the emphasis on the prevention side of things, but it is a common question we get asked. We're strategically putting less emphasis on it because we don't have to report on it, and we're instead talking about the people that we were able to help, the people we prevented from facing homelessness. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, under what circumstance is someone not allowed to access the rent bank? Like, how would you deny someone from using the rent bank?
Most common is that they don't actually, if we don't have the grants at the site, if we don't have Reaching Home Dollars or others, if they don't have the capacity to repay the loan, then we can't approve them for it. So there needs to be an indication that their monthly income exceeds their monthly household expenses.
Okay. And last question, what's the maximum funds can someone access from the rent bank?
So for us, because we allow our partners to set loan amounts that reflect their local rental market, Fort St. John doesn't rent at the same price as Cranbrook, as Victoria or Vancouver, but we say publicly up to $3,500 can be allowed, can be borrowed. Of course, there's that factor of what can the person, what capacity do they have to repay it? That also factors into the amount that they're lent. Does that make sense? Okay.
Hi, I'm from New Brunswick as well, and we run a loan fund, Kaleidoscope Social Impact. And we used to do, I guess, a rent bank to a degree, but it was focused on probably the wrong people because they were on social assistance. One one of the things that, and I just wanted to make it clear that you guys are not doing that, that this is for people who have moderate income. And I don't know what that means in BC, but it's not for people who are on income assistance. These are people who are working and generating income. So that's just one question, if you could ask. Yeah.
So first question, we use what's called the BC Hills score, the housing income, but we also tell our partners you have flexibility in that. So don't think of a hard, fast rule. Are you familiar with the housing income? It gets set by region and household size, and we just basically use it as a benchmark. If somebody's $2,000 or $3,000 over that income, still consider them. Like if they're $25,000 over that, that's probably not fitting our income eligibility. For our funding agreement with the province of BC, people who are in income assistance and persons with disabilities are eligible to apply. So we probably see in the range of 30 to 35% of applicants. And I'll get to the next point, which is I'll acknowledge that the question is, are we then supplementing poor shelter rates? I'll let that stay where it is. But the majority of people that we're dealing with are people who are working, but also a large percentage of people right now are people who are waiting for things like getting onto EI. And so they need that bridge funding because they know it's coming next month, but if they lose their rental right now, they're in trouble. So we know that they're most likely, and we'll also on the idea that they are going to be approved and make that because they need that bridge funding to stay housed.
Okay. So the other thing that we found was that there was an improvement in the margin of income. So one of the things that you just said was that they were going to be approved for EI, so they had a new stream of income potentially. And so I don't know if there's any counseling with your nonprofit partners around that. So if people just have the same income but they get a loan, the question is, where do they find the money to pay back a loan? So especially if the margin of income is so low. And so, I mean, what you said with the default rate speaks to that, likely. And the fact that you increase your amortization probably speaks to that as well. That, you know, you've started in 2019, you say it was a 3-year term, so already you're starting to extend. And we went through the same process, that people may not be able to pay back, and so it becomes less a loan. And that's fine if that's what it is. If it's all about preventing eviction, that's great. But we have to be careful about what we're assuming when we create a rent bank where we call it a loan. So, and the fact that Reaching Home is involved to provide a grant, I think that's good. Because in reality, people will need a grant as you get further down the line in your amortization.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be had. I mean, I've colleagues in Manitoba, their program's different. Toronto is different as well. They all have different eligibility criteria. In some of these places, people who are on ministry or government assistance are not eligible. It happened to be part of our funding agreement, and so that we follow through on that. It is still a loan, and we hear lots of testimony about people. I went and did a presentation out at UBC a few weeks ago to concerned community members, and at the end somebody came up and said, you might not know this, but we accessed the rent bank program. My husband works in the arts and movie industry. We're temporarily laid off. This was a great solution for us because we were able to pay our rent and we can pay it back. So yes, there's always going to be a percentage of people who may not be able to do that, but there is a large percentage of people who can benefit from this, and they need that financial assistance. They don't want to get into a high interest rate lending institution, and it provides an alternative for them.
Sorry. So I feel that a lot of cities would probably be a little apprehensive on doing a rent bank. I can't talk. It's
okay. It's a second.
It's a long day. Rent bank, simply because of the fear of individuals not paying it back. Stating something obvious here, obviously it's been working for you. Otherwise, you still wouldn't be standing. So there must not be a lot of individuals that aren't paying, like they're faithful and honest about it and try and pay it back. That's my first question.
There are a lot of people that pay it back, to answer your question. I think that what others are seeing is that they're seeing not only the instances where people are not being evicted and not experiencing homelessness or having to relocate, there's also those other secondary supports that are proving to be really beneficial for renters. I think if we keep the conversation in our communities focused just on things like the repayment rate, we've completely missed what is the essence of the program. The essence of the program is to keep people housed.
My second question was, you may have stated this, so I apologize because we've had a lot of information. How much is your funding from Reaching Home? Are you mostly dependent on that?
So the way that we've partnered with Reaching Home is in the Metro Vancouver area. We're actually the contract holder, and then we work with our partners. Since 2020, I believe it's almost $1.5 million that we have distributed in grants. Some of our rent bank partners apply to Reaching Home independent of us. So Kelowna has applied and been successful, as well as Victoria. I'm not sure about your funding cycles, but in 2024, we expect to see a new round of funding applications from Reaching Home. So we'll be talking to our partners about how we can support them in their application for that, if they feel like that's a great complement to their program.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, so I feel slightly ignorant asking because I should know, but I'm not aware of a rent bank type program in Alberta. And I wonder if our colleagues in Supported Referrals maybe would comment, if there was a rent bank available, how might we utilize it? Would it be a common intervention? Would it be very helpful? And then the context is the Alberta, maybe the only thing I know from Alberta is that there was some time ago the Alberta Homeless and Eviction Prevention Fund that ballooned. I think the budget was like $6 million and it ballooned to $120 million. It was unchecked. It's not a rent bank, but that's the only equivalent that I know. So just if we can comment on that.
Yeah, so in Edmonton, we do have an organization called Bissell. I don't know if there's anybody here from Bissell, but they run what's called a community bridge program, which is essentially a rent bank, which is why our supported referral program is really focused on individuals who have just begun to experience homelessness and or they have an eviction in place and there isn't that ability to repair the relationship with the landlord. Supported referrals can be used in those instances for individuals who are at risk of losing their housing, have an eviction notice because of rent. The community bridge program that we have in Edmonton is fantastic because same as what BC has, they do have it within a loan type structure, but they also have quite a bit of case management with the individual. So when meeting with them, they talk to them about that loan payment and create that payment plan, but also really want to make sure that they have everything else that they need to be able to maintain their housing, because sometimes the rent is just the one piece. As you had mentioned, there's multiple reasons why somebody might be behind on their rent, and what are those other reasons and how can we plug resources into those as well. So I know in Edmonton, we do have that, and supported referral. One of our supported referral agencies is also Bissell. So they're pretty great. If they have someone go to their community bridge program because they're facing eviction and they're unable to move through that rent bank for whatever reason, it's irreparable with the landlord, they can then work on a housing plan and plug in that supported referral and finding something pretty quickly.
There we go. Okay. Great panel and fabulous to hear these two pieces kind of side by side with the supported referral and the rent bank. And interesting in the supported referral piece talking about chronicity. And, you can't kind of serve everybody, and a focus on chronic homelessness, which makes me wonder about gender and how that plays out and actually both pieces along the continuum here in terms of access and what you see around the supported referral. It was really great to hear you actually acknowledge the turnaways and that you're tracking that and seeing what happens. Always worried about hidden homelessness and what people then do, and then wondering about the rent bank, just given women, financial literacy, risk taking, where that might fit in. So anything on that would be interesting.
Yeah, I think from a gender lens, we still don't have the full picture of what that looks like in St. John's, for sure. I think by and large we do, we see more males, like cis males, in kind of that 30 to 50 age bracket entering homelessness period. That's changing. We do, one of our biggest support referral agencies, however, is our intimate partner violence shelter. I say biggest, but they do certainly, because we are able to intervene for female or female identified folks who are exiting violence, and kind of step in it from that perspective. But yeah, it is like that kind of demographic breakdown is something that we really hope to get a little bit of a better handle on, because we also know that, again, like for folks who are experiencing hidden homelessness, which does represent a lot of female and female identifying folks in our community, we're not necessarily getting the touch points from them at all. So that is a space that we really want to do a little bit more work on, for sure.
Yeah, and I would just add, so majority of individuals who have received supported referrals in Edmonton are women identifying individuals, which is great. We do same. It has supported individuals who have left domestic violence situations. We've also had situations where there was a widow, her husband had passed away, and supported referral had really supported her to be able to maintain her housing and not have to worry about that piece while figuring out everything else having to do with the loss of husband. So that's great. I think the primary thing is, if you are able to have something similar in your community, really broadening the agencies and organizations that are able to do it is fantastic. So as long as you have a broad range of agencies or organizations who are serving absolutely all genders, all populations, then you should be able to catch whoever is in need of that support.
So one of the things when we developed the Rent Bank program, when we started working with those 7 groups, they all had paper-based, independent ways of doing things. So to get everybody on the same page with the same application into an online technology took some time. But we also made a decision, I don't know if we were correct or not, this is maybe one of those learnings, but we didn't want people's applications any bias or interference to affect, so we created an optional demographic survey that would pop up after the application was submitted, so that the person could feel confident that that was detached from it. It's great for that part of it. What isn't great is that we don't have that integrated demographic survey information into our survey. So right now, we have a test, like a draft, and it's with DEI consultants, and right this week it's with an accessibility consultant to make sure the questions we're asking, how we're asking those kinds of things are going to clear all of those pre-screens. We're going to next look to integrate it into the technology, and then I think be able to talk in way more incredible ways about who is, but more importantly, who's not. So we know just by the optional demographic survey that it's largely women that are accessing the services. Right now it would be primarily Caucasian or white people, but I would say to that, it's probably because we've created barriers or other reasons that we're not reaching into community. It's not reflective of who needs the services. So it's actually on us to get better at what we do.
That's a great question leading up to the one that I have. As somebody's maybe transitioning who's a victim survivor from living within a family to living on their own, maybe taking kids with them, are they able to access that knowing that the income for the family would have represented the entire family previously, and then they'd be stepping out on their own? Sure.
Yes, they are. We obviously want to work with support service agencies that are going to help families through that. So we have a great group in Vancouver that does, like, it's called Move Up, and they'll move all the family and the furniture for free. So we want to look at those kinds of supports as well to support a family in that situation. In particular, our Vancouver Rent Bank has a funder who has given them money for grants just for individuals who are fleeing domestic violence. So we'd love to see partnerships with other pockets of money to be able to give grants at that time of crisis. So they are eligible. It would be dependent on that income. If they don't have an income, then of course it's going to become more difficult. So we're going to have to think about other resources outside of the rent bank to kind of complement and support that family.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and a special thank you to Andrea, Abigail, and Melissa for fantastic presentations. If you have further questions, please feel free to reach out to any one of them who'd be thrilled to continue sharing their knowledge and expertise with you.